Jai Shiva Narayana. Yeah, we are.
Jai Shiva Narayana.
Thank you for coming to the meeting.
Thank you, Mataji, for inviting me.
Okay, so you please introduce the subject.
Yes, thank you, Mataji. And this is like part 3 of our discussion regarding the koshas, and I think this is the sheaths, so to speak. And obviously, in the last couple, we've discussed. There'd been particular emphasis on the pranamaya kosha, and then we talked about the manamaya kosha. We talked about the chakras, and today towards the end of the last session, we started to discuss about the mind more. And today it's moving on, focusing on the kosha of the intellect, and this leads on to a wider debate, Mataji, which is a wider discussion, should we say, rather than a debate, which is mind and intellect the same, or is it different? And as it so happens, Mataji, I was reading the Bhagavad Gita chapter 8 when Krishna says, with your mind and intellect, focus on me. So Krishna, the Bhagavad Gita, there's not a single word is said without any. It's not said for nothing. So clearly, the implication here is that there is a distinction between buddhi and the mind, and then. Mataji, you've got the sheaths where there's a clear mind sheath and then an intellect sheath. Before you get to that last sheath, before the atman. So what I'd like to understand today is perhaps what is the difference between mind and buddhi, and also, Mataji, how we use that to become more God conscious, to become Krishna conscious, as we say. So it's that is important. And how do we distinguish that from the brain, Mataji? You know, the brain, the organ, the brain, sitting in the skull. Is that synonymous with the mind and intellect, or is it different? I think these are some important topics, Mataji.
Okay, good. So, first of all, yes, when we speak of the 8 elements of the material nature, like Krishna said, Bhinna Prakritir Ashtadha, speaking about 8-fold material nature. So there are 8 elements of material nature. We have 5 gross elements, Pancha Mahabhuta, and then we have the 3 subtle elements. Now, the 5 gross physical elements are the earth, water, fire, air, and akash, means space. It's not exactly space, but it's a subtle matter that supports all the other elements.
You mean ether?
Ether, ether. Yeah, akash. But ether or space, sometimes people confuse the ether because there is a gas that is of that name, there is a chemical substance of that name, so people may get confused. So ether is actually something that we refer to when we speak about the radio waves that are traveling on the ether or space. That is not a void, that is a kind of extremely subtle matter.
Well, as it so happens, Mataji, I think this is one area where I think the English language has got right, because, as you know, we commonly use a term, when a document's been sent somewhere and no one knows where it's gone, we say, oh, has it been lost in the ether?
Yeah.
Like, we use this term like, it's out there somewhere, waiting to be discovered, and no one quite knows where it is. So it does imply, it's a separate state of being, so to speak.
Yeah, it's a separate element. It's an element that contains everything else, and supports the waves and particles and stuff. The current science of physics is only now starting to understand a little better. Already Nikola Tesla was speaking about this ether or Akash, and in fact, there is a lot of information, a lot of knowledge that Nikola Tesla put together that unfortunately it was lost for political reasons. But anyway, but it's still a material element. Now, subtler than Akash, we have manas, buddhi, and ahankara. These are also material elements. The manas is a particular element, and the buddhi is a different element than manas. So, as you have already guessed, it is connected with the kosha that is called vijnanamaya or vijnanamaya kosha. It's a body of knowledge or intelligence. So, what is intellect? What is intelligence? What is buddhi? Buddhi is the element that on which the mind functions. The mind needs intellect, and it is the intellect that controls the mind. Just like the mind controls the senses, and the senses control the body. Now, the intellect or intelligence or buddhi is a very particular element because it can work also on the spiritual level. So it can be spiritualized. Just like the mind can be spiritualized, the intellect can be even more so, more easily, more deeply spiritualized. Spiritual means consciousness. The difference between intelligence and consciousness is that the intelligence is the object and the consciousness is the subject.
So, is intellect synonymous with intelligence then?
Yeah. Yeah. We use it in this way. It's even in dictionary meaning, intellect is defined as a faculty of understanding, but so is intelligence. Of course, in English, the word intelligence has come to indicate a corpus of information that is collected especially by the secret services, But again, it's connected with knowledge and understanding. So the buddhi is the element that enables us to understand things both at the material and the spiritual level. So the mind is important because it supports our mental activities, the activities of the mind. I don't know how else to call them.
As an example, Mataji, I'm just thinking just so that we can give people an idea of the distinction. The mind is where the mind is is where our thought, it's akin to our thoughts. Like, for instance...
And the mind contains our thoughts.
The mind contains the thoughts, but the intellect recognizes that, hang on, these thoughts are... the intellect recognizes that actually, are these thoughts our own, or are these thoughts something else? Is that a distinction, Mataji, between
the intellect is still an object, is still a material element, but it is a faculty of evaluation.
Discernment,
yes. Discernment, evaluation. In fact, it is also called vivek. Vivek means being able to distinguish what is good and what is not. Pravritti cha, nivritti cha. What is a pravritti, what we should do and what we should not do. What is nivritti? The mind is just bringing objects, feelings, thoughts, memories, decisions, things that are coming, they're produced in the mind and by the mind. But the intelligence is what enables us to choose. That's why we say that intelligence controls the mind.
So is intelligence, Mataji, almost like the ability to filter and categorize the thoughts in our mind, mind?
Yeah,
it's
control.
Almost like it's almost like the controller of the mind.
Yeah.
Is that how you describe it, basically?
Yeah, it's basically the operating principle of the mind. That is different from the mind.
Say Lord Brahma. I only ask that because Lord Brahma is meant to be made of pure intellect. That's what we sometimes hear the description of, Mataji. So that's why I asked for it.
Yeah, it's still a material element, though. That's the body of Brahma. It's not, the Jivatman, of course.
Yes.
Okay. So, this intellect or intelligence, the buddhi, is something that is important, because if we engage this material element that is part of our body, our subtle body, we engage this material element in our spiritual growth, our spiritual progress, our service, our acquisition of knowledge, our application of knowledge. That is what we call vijnanamaya. So the vijnanamaya kosha, vijnanamaya kosha, is the sheath or covering, physical covering, that is the subtlest covering, that is most connected to the consciousness of the soul. So the consciousness is not a material element. The intelligence is still a material element, it's a faculty. The consciousness is our actual identity. The consciousness is us. We are Sat, Chit, Ananda. Consciousness is Chit. You see the difference?
Yes. One is the subject and one is the object.
Exactly. The consciousness is the subject. The consciousness uses intelligence to control the mind and uses the mind to do all the other physical activities. Now, the third subtle material element is called ahankara, which is even subtler than the intellect or intelligence.
Lots of confusion arises about what ahankara is, Mataji, from all sorts of circles. So I'm not even going to begin to tell you what I think about it. I'd love to hear how it should be, how it should be described, basically, Mataji.
Okay, so ahankara literally means I am doing. I am the doer. Okay, it's the sense of subjectivity that is separate from the Brahman. It's the individual functioning, the individuality that gives a subject to intelligence. If intelligence compared to the mind is the subject and the mind is the object, now the ahankara is the subject compared to the intelligence that becomes the object. So, who understands? I understand. It's a sense of I, aham. When you say ahankara, kara is a very general term because it indicates any type of action, including the action of understanding. Are you following?
Yes. So
okay.
let me tell you what I sort of understand from what you've said. The intellect is a little bit more outer. You've gone past intellect now because you have discerned that the intellect is still someone who thinks I, but the sheath after that is the person who thinks I am doing this.
Yep.
You've got to breach that before you get to the atman. Is that right?
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah, we need to overcome it, to go beyond it. Of course, we can still use the mind and the intelligence and the sense of identity, but these become relative to our actual nature, our actual identity, because our identity is not separated, is not based on duality.
Exactly. So when Arjuna is at Kurukshetra, his thoughts are all in his mind. That's his mind.
Yeah.
His intellect is still. If he thinks that he's the one that's doing the fighting, he hasn't breached that final sheath yet.
Yeah. Or at least he's playing that part.
But what it is, Mataji, is that let's say Arjuna's on that battlefield, and we're using Arjuna as an example because everyone knows.
Yeah.
His thoughts are right. I need to do the fighting now. That's his mind. His intellect is saying, "Oh, I'm going to do the fighting," but ahankara, breaching that, the intellect is still saying, "I'm doing the fighting." You're still exercising your intellect because you think you're doing the fighting, but ahankara is, "I am doing it," and you've got to get past that because he's not. He is only an instrument in the fight.
Exactly.
So therefore,
yes.
That the minute he recognizes that I am an instrument in the fight, he has breached ahankara. Is that right?
That's exactly what Krishna says. Nimitta matra bhava savyasachin. Become just an instrument. We are instruments. Our ahankar is just an instrument. It's an instrument of the pure consciousness. So every time we think or we speak or we think in terms of I, aham, we are just using a material element that enables us to act in this world. So, Govindamadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami, Namami aham here, aham there. But there is a different meaning of aham when Krishna speaks about, and says aham. Because when Krishna speaks and says aham bija pradapita, aham adir hidevanam, aham sarvasya prabhavo, matta sarvam pravartate. It is not speaking about an individual consciousness. He is speaking as a complete Brahman. So that's why the sense of aham in Krishna is not the ahankara. is the pure consciousness, of course, because Krishna is communicating through the words and in the material world. He needs to say aham. He needs to use this element. But his consciousness is beyond that. That's why he says, although I am doing everything, I'm not doing anything. Because it's very clear, once we attain the transcendental level, we are working, but our actions are not separated by duality. Our consciousness is not separated by duality. We are constantly conscious that we are instruments, that we are part of the whole, the everything. We are part of Brahman. That's why the Upanishads say aham brahmasmi. Because the aham, the ahankara, is not material anymore. We have gone beyond the ahankara. We are just the aham, but we are not doing anything. That's again when Krishna speaks about the karma yoga. He's saying someone who is on the transcendental level, although constantly engaged in activities, he's not doing anything. Because there is no ahankara. There is the consciousness of being an instrument of the aham of which Krishna is speaking.
It's really interesting. You've just used, because we've spoken about this before, but there is a perception that karma yoga is somehow quote unquote inferior to bhakti yoga, whereas when you go back to source and you read Gita Bhashya by Ramanuja Acharya, Ramanuja argues the contrary. Ramanuja's view is that so it kind of flies in the face of modern thought, whereas what Ramanuja says is
the modern thought as well as Ramanuja are missing the point, because they present karma yoga and bhakti yoga as two different paths. They're not. Just like jnana yoga, bhakti yoga, kriya yoga, all the forms of yoga. Why the Bhagavad Gita has each chapter named after an aspect of yoga. Yoga is one.
No, but my point on this, Mataji, is that prior to reading Gita Bhashya, I had this viewpoint that karma yoga, you weren't able to quote unquote attain the supreme by karma yoga. What Ramanuja really states is that, well, actually, that's what Arjuna was doing on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. It was karma yoga. Do you know what I mean? So that separation felt artificial, if that makes sense, Mataji.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying. The point is, if we make we see yoga as different, independent, individual paths. Series of individual paths. You're talking about yogis, karmis, and jnanis, and bhaktas. Yeah, well,
I've heard that a lot. So people say, "Oh, you can't become God conscious with karma yoga alone." So people think, people get deflated because most people work in the world. So they then think, well, this is how people think. They think, bhakti has to be something very special that I'll never ever get to in my life. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. We can see the different types of yoga as different, like the sheaths of our body.
Yes.
we can say, for example, that the karma yoga is like the anandamaya kosha. And then the Jnana Yoga is like the Vijnanamaya kosha, vijnanamaya kosha. And then the Bhakti Yoga is like the anandamaya kosha. You cannot separate them, because the karma yoga without the yoga is not yoga. And bhakti means yoga. Yoga means bhakti. Because what is yoga? Yoga is a union, is to unite the individual self to the supreme self. What is that if not bhakti? So the difference between karma and karma yoga is the yoga, which is the bhakti. So when we see in the third chapter already, Krishna is saying, if you perform your duty by offering everything, doing everything in a spirit of renunciation, of detachment, of transcendental consciousness, in a spirit of sacred action, of yajna, that is karma yoga. It's not karma, it's karma yoga, which is not different from bhakti.
That makes perfect sense, because what people try to separate, sometimes they try to separate bhakti as being on a different quote unquote platform, so to speak. You're not at bhakti yet.
Yeah, but if you just try to focus on bhakti without doing any service, that's not bhakti.
No, it's just that bhakti was sold as a very specific service. That's why, effectively, people got confused, if that makes sense.
No. Bhakti, it does not depend on the absence of the material body. We need to act. We need to work. Krishna is saying very clearly, nobody can even maintain one's body without working. So why you can already be situated in bhakti even if you're still working to maintain your material body, because your material body becomes spiritualized, is an instrument.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the reason for me mentioning it is because I had the analogy in my head, which you've just mentioned, of the different sheaths, like karma, bhakti, jnana, and they can't be separated.
Exactly.
So I think that's why I raised that. So Mataji, you've talked about the intellect, the buddhi. You've talked about, obviously, the sheath before that, which is the mind sheath. What about the next sheath, Mataji? Because that's the one that intrigues a lot of people. That's
the anandamaya kosha.
The atman. Yeah, that's the sheath before the atman.
That is the ahankara. It's the aham.
So that's akin to the false ego. That last sheath.
It's not the false ego. No. That is the problem, because ahankara is translated as false ego.
Yes, that's why.
But it's not a correct translation. Because then false ego takes a lot of luggage and people get even more confused. Ahankara is ahankara is the sense of self that is individual. It is false in the sense that we are not individuals. But when people use the expression false ego to translate the ahankara, when you tell them it is false because we are not individuals, their brain is going to pop.
No, but my impression is false ego means simply saying that I am not the doer, I am the servant, rather than I am
the instrument. Yeah, because the servant is still. Still the ahankara.
I am the instrument. I am the mere instrument.
Yeah.
So that's my revised definition.
Yeah, but the problem is that if you explain that to our friends that we both know very well, they will start shouting and screaming, Mayavadi, Mayavadi, you know, because they cannot understand that when Krishna says so many times in Bhagavad Gita that we need to overcome the illusion of duality, he's not being a Mayavadi. Krishna is not a Mayavadi.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So Mataji, this last sheath, is the subtle body, when people talk of the subtle body, does it encompass all these sheaths?
Yeah, they're all material elements. Yeah.
So the subtle body, Mataji, is still therefore material, and it's like the underwear, so to speak, that someone wears, and a ghost is effectively the subtle body of that person, leaving the material body, but not yet acquired another material body. Is that
physical body? Another physical body. Now, the subtle body as well as the physical body can be, because they are material elements, they're subject to the gunas. So we can have a manas, buddhi, ahankar in sattva guna, or we can have a manas, buddhi, ahankar in rajas guna or in tamas guna. So the ahankara in sattva guna will think, I am the servant. And that's sattva. That's not transcendental.
Whereas the transcendentally associated person will say,
is beyond the individuality.
I am the instrument. I am not. There's no sense of individual identification.
There is no sense of separation. You know, that's like the hand that's doing its job. You know, the hand doesn't think, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. You know, it doesn't think like that. It's natural. This is why it's called our natural position. Because we don't even need to think about it. We are aware, we are conscious of being part of the body and doing whatever the body is doing, the body is doing. It's not the hand thinks I am doing. The hand thinks the body is doing. That's why Krishna, you know, sometimes there are, you know, when I was studying Gita, I was, you know, perplexed. There are some passages, you know, when, for example, Krishna says, Vishanteta Danantaram, they enter in me. You know, when someone achieves a transcendental level, they enter in me. How they enter in me? How they enter in Krishna? You know, it's not that Krishna is, you know, eating them or something, you know. But our consciousness is not, you know, it doesn't become impersonal, but it loses the duality that is in the individuality. It's very difficult to perceive because, you know, it's called achintya, adhokshaja. You know, it's not something that is easy to understand, especially for people who are still identified with the physical body.
What you're saying is the consciousness can never be separate from the supreme consciousness. It can't ever be separate from Krishna.
Exactly. We are with Krishna. We are in Krishna. You know. Well, Krishna said, Mata Paradaramnanya. You know, everything rests in me, like pearls on a thread, like a pearls in a necklace, jewels in a necklace are resting on a thread. Means you cannot be separated. You know.
So I have got a question, Mataji, on this very particular point. You know, you mentioned the fact that obviously the individual consciousness, and then you've got the supreme consciousness. And again, I've been thinking about this, particularly, it's very apt that you mentioned this now. When you have the sum total of all the atmans, Mataji, that is the supreme consciousness, but is the supreme consciousness, what I'm saying is, let's say, I'm only using this as an example.
You're asking if the supreme consciousness is individual.
Yes, that's what I'm asking you.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's not the type of individual we have in mind. It's not what we mean by individual. It's a different type, Of course, he's a person. But it's not individual in a separated sense. When we say that God is omnipresent, what does that mean? It's not that God is zooming from one place to the other like Flash Gordon, it's already there and it's not moving. It's not that God needs to go from one place to the other. It's already there. It's already everywhere. How can we understand the idea of an individual like that? When we speak about individuality, because we live in a world of physical bodies, of material bodies, we think that the individual has a beginning and an end. Cannot be everywhere at the same time. But that's not what again, God is.
No, exactly. This is what I've been sort of trying to grapple with, which is, let's say, and again, let's just say hypothetically, Mataji, there were 10 million atmans. I'm just saying, just completely hypothetically.
Yeah.
Those 10 million atmans, when taken together, that is Brahman, or is it 10 million atmans and then one supreme conscious being? So it's 10 million plus 1 equals Brahman.
No. That's why the invocation of a number of Upanishads, including the Isha Upanishad, is Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. It's not 10 million plus 1. It's 1.
That's correct. So the first scenario was the correct understanding. Is that right, Mataji, basically?
Come again with the first scenario?
The first scenario is, let's say, hypothetically, there's 10 million atmans. When the sum total of all those 10 million atmans is Brahman, the supreme consciousness. Yeah. Am I right, Mataji?
Yeah. It's always 1.
That's correct.
That's why the Shastras say that God is 1 without a second.
Yeah, absolutely. This is my point, Mataji, because I was thinking, I previously had this idea that 10 million atmans come together as individual units, and then you've got the supreme engine in the which is the 10 million plus 1, and that's because that is Brahman, but it isn't, is it, Mataji?
Yeah.
That was the wrong. That was the wrong impression. Basically.
Yeah, it's always 1. The fact that we see 10 millions, it's a Maya. It's illusion.
Yes.
Can be Yoga Maya or Mahamaya, but it's always Maya.
Yes, but my point, Mataji, is that it's the plus 1 where I'd gone wrong.
Yeah.
It's when you take all that together as all those individual, that Brahman is the total of all the individual consciousness, everything together. That is the supreme being. Is that right, Mataji?
Yeah. Is the supreme existence, the total existence.
And personality is simply a manifestation of consciousness.
Yes.
Of that consciousness. Am I right there?
Yes, correct. Correct. We have this very important concept of manifestation. And if we understand Yoga Maya and Mahamaya, that's the key. Because people think Maya is illusion, bad Maya, material, witch, Maya the witch. they are missing the point. Because illusion is at the same time Yogamaya and Mahamaya, it's the same person, the same personality, the same energy, it's always Maya. I don't know if that makes us a Mayavadi, but no, Yogamaya, no. you cannot approach God, the Bhagavan without Yogamaya.
Absolutely.
It's Bhakti is Maya. Bhakti is Ladini Shakti. All the Shaktis are Maya. Yogamaya, either Yogamaya or Mahamaya.
Can you qualify that, Mataji? Because, again, I'm sure that statement would ruffle a few feathers. From certain people.
Yeah.
But could you qualify that? Because people will think, hey, Bhakti is Maya. Maya is Bhakti. What's going on here? Do you mind qualifying that, Mataji?
The feathers will be so ruffled they get a lot of static electricity. With thunder and lightning, very, very frightening.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, now, Mataji.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why Bhakti is Maya? Because it requires you to be to contemplate the object of Bhakti as separate from yourself. We have the Bhakta, the Bhakti, and the Bhokta. But it's all one. But the Bhakti requires us to see a distinction. Aham bhajami. I worship. But what are you worshipping? If everything is one, you are one. There is no separation, no distinction. Our personality in the spiritual world is a product of Yogamaya. Just like all the personalities of God with all the forms and names and activities and qualities and everything, they're all manifestations of Yogamaya. Now, it's Maya in the sense that it is not what it seems. It seems that we are separated from Krishna. The Vipralamba rasa is the feeling that we are separated from Krishna. Okay? But how can we be separated from, from God? If God is omnipresent and in our heart, and how can we be separated? How can we feel the separation? It's Yogamaya. It's magic. It's magic in the sense of illusion, but it's a good illusion that creates anandamaya. So that's a consciousness. Anandamaya kosha is made of ananda because it's a consciousness. That's
what I wanted to ask, because that's the last kosha before the atman, isn't it, Mataji?
It's the bridge. It's the bridge. Yeah.
Why is it called the bliss kosha, ananda? Why is that called?
Because that's the reason why the Brahman manifested in the first place. Eko bahushyat. God wanted to become many. Why? Because he wanted to taste the Ananda. He wanted to taste the Yogamaya. Without Yogamaya, Krishna is just the Brahman. Well, just the Brahman. Krishna says, I am the source of the Brahman. So it's beyond the Brahman. There is the origin of the Brahman. But it's not a limited personality separated from everything else. The Brahman is what manifests in the material world. But before the manifestation, because the Brahman is not manifested but becomes manifested. The fact that Brahman has a name is already a manifestation. I don't know. It's, I understand. I realize it's difficult.
No. This is really important, because that is the last sheath.
Yes.
And that's obviously, it's always intrigued me, because it's effectively getting over. So correct me, this is my sort of synopsis of what you're saying.
Yeah.
That last sheath is effectively the sheath where we get over the fact that we are not the doers. We're not even the servants. We're not even some humble servant. We are simply an instrument. And because we're an instrument, we cannot be separated from Brahman. We cannot even. So
correct.
That last thought process, because it's like your analogy of the hand. How can the hand be doing something different from the person who controls the hand?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's just not possible. The hand isn't a servant of my body.
Yeah, that's why Krishna. Yeah, that's why Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, "Mama ivamso jiva loke, jiva bhuta sanatana."
So breaking that last kosha is that last remnant before you become truly realized, because
we are already realized. As long as we have a material body, it's better that we stay in the anandamaya kosha. We don't try to go beyond that.
Yes. Because of course,
otherwise the danger is that we start projecting, we slide back into the mind, and into material identification. It's just like sattva. In this world, sattva can never be completely pure. Vishuddha sattva, is just sattva without the ahankar. Okay.
Yes. So Shuddha sattva is breaking that last sheath, then, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But as long as we have a body, the sattva needs to use the rajas. Otherwise, it will slide back into tamas.
Yes, I understand that. But so, Mataji, why is it then that some people say, "Oh, being sattvic is not good enough. You've got to be Shuddha sattvic, transcendental, like the atman, pure atman, on the level of pure
atman." Yeah, but they
atman.
don't know what atma means. You can be identifying with the Vishuddha sattva. We develop our Siddha Deha. But we are still working through the material elements. As long as we are in this body, we need to work through the material elements. Like Krishna said, Guna Guneshu Vartante. The gunas must be engaged in the gunas.
Yeah. So I know what you're saying now. What you're saying effectively is that there's no point trying to quote unquote breach that last sheath, because the last sheath is there for a reason.
Exactly.
It's there to, and then what you're saying is that this is why it's intrinsically linked, from my understanding of what you've just said, Bhakti and yoga, because Bhakti and Maya, because Maya is necessary in order to effectively undertake Bhakti.
Yes.
Because by default, Mataji, if I'm doing something in Bhakti, I have to feel as though I'm doing something for somebody. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Basically?
And when we are in this world, we have to use not only the ahankara, we have to use the intellect, the buddhi, and the manas, and the body. We cannot just say, "Oh, I don't want to use the body, I just want to use the mind." And then, "Oh, I don't want to use the mind, I just want to use intelligence." "Oh, I don't want to use it, I only want to use the aham." And
yes.
We need the whole package.
Right. So do you know why? And do you know why I say this, Mataji? I say it because, as we've discussed these sheaths, the key message that comes out is that the prana is something that you can control and modify through various practices.
Yeah.
The prana is modifiable. That's what comes out of this discussion.
Yeah,
because
sure.
the
Correct.
prana is modifiable.
Correct.
So that's changeable. So through various practices, kundalini and all the things we've talked about,
Through the mind.
Yeah, through the mind, you can modify your pranic sheath.
Yeah,
for the better.
And we can modify the mind through the intelligence. We can modify the intelligence through the sense of self.
Yes.
That's why Krishna is saying, that the body, the objects of the senses are controlled by the senses, the senses are controlled by the mind is controlled by the intelligence, and, the atman is the actual self that is beyond the duality.
So he's outlining those koshas metaphysically.
Of course, yes.
Now, so that final bit is really interesting, because we're talking about how you modify the prana through the mind, then you modify the mind through the intelligence, the buddhi, and then, but that last bit is interesting. You modify the buddhi through the sense of self.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about that, Mataji, practically.
We have always in Bhagavad Gita, when we have the chapter about the 3 types of Shraddha, the 3 types of faith, and talking about the austerities of the body, the austerities of the mind, the austerities of the intelligence, that's also in the Yama and Niyama we have a similar approach. Like, for example, the Satyam, how you apply Satyam. We have the Sharirika Satyam and the Vachika Satyam and the Manasika Satya, the Bhaudika Satya. The Sharirika Satya is honesty. You need to be consistent. Your actions have to be aligned with your thoughts and with your consciousness and everything. This is also one of the invocations of the Upanishads, that is saying exactly that. Then the Vachika Satya means you have to tell, to speak in accordance to Satyam, to truthfulness. Then we have the Manasik Satya, you have to think truthful. The Bhaudika Satya means that you have to, you come to a level in which you understand everything through Satyam. It's not even on the level of the mind anymore. It's a higher level of applying truthfulness.
So, Mataji, would a practical way of looking at things, using this final sheath, the anandamaya sheath, is to say, is to recognize that actually everything that I'm doing, I am, I'm not breaching the sheath or anything. It's just being aware that I am not the doer.
Yes.
I am simply an instrument in whatever I do for Krishna. Is that thought process, is carrying that thought process, is that akin to using the anandamaya kosha to modify one's intellect, so to speak?
Yeah, we can say that. Yeah, we can say that.
So, and it's really interesting because each sheath is, you use the faculties of each sheath to modify the sheath that came before that. Is that right, Matthew?
Yeah.
Effective?
Yeah. Well, not came before that. Actually, if we want to look at it in the development sense, it starts on the other, on the other direction.
Right.
So the last sheet that is produced is the anandamaya kosha. It's not the first.
Indeed. So the food sheath, the material body, is that last sheath, effectively.
Yeah.
So it goes out.
But we go backwards. We go towards the source. Also I think in the Bhagavata Purana it is explained that how the yogi, the process of yoga, that is exactly the opposite, the inverted process of creation. The
yogi, you're going towards the atman.
Yes, the yogi merges the physical elements one into the other, and then the subtle elements one into the other, and then merges everything in the pure consciousness. So this is a process of liberation. Yeah.
So the yogi starts with a physical body, then he uses that physical body to modify the prana, and he uses the prana then to modify the mind, and the mind is used to modify the intellect, and the intellect is used to modify it's going almost backwards. Whereas in creation,
not used to modify, not so much used to modify, but is merging into them.
Whereas
because the modification comes on the other in the other direction.
Yes, whereas in creation starts with the Nasadya as the Nasadya Sukta.
Yes. The opposite, the reverse process is not the modification, is the dissolution. It's a merging. Dissolution. Yeah.
What the yogi is doing is merging. And that is the opposite direction to creation, which is
exactly because it's a dissolution. Right? That's why it is said that Shiva controls the dissolution, because this is the process for liberation. But the dissolution doesn't end up in the nothingness, in the nirvana, in the void. In the nothingness.
It's pure consciousness.
Yeah, it's pure consciousness. And pure consciousness contains everything.
So Mataji, is this why Shiva cannot be separated from Vishnu? Because,
yeah, exactly.
Because
Shiva is Vishnu.
Because what you're doing, Mataji, and this is what inherently links to the koshas, because what you're doing is you're merging the material body into the prana, you're merging the prana into the mind, you're merging the mind into the intellect, you're merging the intellect into the sense of self, and then you have, beyond that, you have Atman, which is pure consciousness, Atman Brahman.
Which contains everything.
And that's the process. That's why Shiva is Shiva.
That is, yes, that's the Shiva. Yeah.
Whereas what Vishnu is doing is the
Shiva is right? Vishnu manifested in the material
world. Indeed, and that's why they say Shiva is the destroyer.
Yeah, because you go back.
I mean, the word should be the dissolution. The
dissolution
that existed, or whatever, if that word ever exists, but they call him the destroyer.
Because dissolution, destroy, it's people who don't actually understand the process, they don't see the difference.
Well, this is why, Mataji, I wanted to discuss the koshas, because I kind of felt that I had this very, very superficial understanding of whereas I didn't understand. Understanding the koshas is fundamental to understanding a lot of things, if that makes sense.
Oh, it is important. It is important.
Because you need to understand the why behind the how. Because there's no point me rote learning that Shiva is the destroyer. Oh, is he? He does the cosmic.
Yeah, there's a guy, who gets angry and breaks breaks the household crockery.
But when you understand yoga, Mataji, and you understand that yoga is actually going in the opposite direction to creation, but a fundamentally important one, it's the union of with the divine consciousness, and it's by merging the material sheath into the pranic sheath into the mind sheath into the intellectual sheath, through action. That is important, isn't it, Mataji?
Yeah,
that makes sense.
That's a process. Yeah, that's a key.
I mean, that's been incredibly useful because we haven't just discussed koshas in this scientific manner, although that's important. What we've done here is we've translated it into
Practice.
practice, and also we've linked it to the Bhagavad Gita, which of course is the
the source.
focus of everything that we've
everything is there.
Yes. Are there any other topics related to the koshas that you think we need to discuss, or do you think we've covered the key elements here, Mataji?
I think we have done it. We've covered the whole thing. But I don't know if you get any other questions or points to discuss. We can discuss next time.
Very good, Mataji. I'd like to thank you for a wonderful discussion on a 3-part series that has probably been very, very useful in cementing my understanding of my obeisances to you, Mataji.
Jai Shri Mahadeva.
Jai Shri Mahadeva.